It seems that we're about to hit a brand new era of Disney live-action remakes that potentially could make a big splash at the box office, with some new news regarding casting for the Tangled live-action. Whispers of this remake have been going around for a very long time. I mean, the original film came out way back in 2010, and so I think for the initial stretch of releases through the 2010s decade, Disney largely focused on remakes to old-school Disney films before starting on their Renaissance films too. I think there was probably this idea that anything from this millennium was way too soon to be making a remake, and so audiences wouldn't want it. However, by 2020, questions were being asked as to whether they were going to go ahead with this film. Eventually, confirmation came that a live action was in development, but it would be years away. Then COVID came, which pushed schedules back immensely, and so it wasn't until actually the end of 2024 that we got any sort of true confirmation the film was entering development. This didn't last long though, as by early 2025, we got the subsequent news that Tangled was being put on ice for the time being due to Snow White bombing so hard at the box office. It did very terribly, and I think this scared the studio. After all, back in the 2010s, they were raking in the money with these movies, culminating in 2019, which saw them cross $1 billion twice, with Aladdin and The Lion King. However, then the bubble burst with COVID, and then sending more remakes straight to Disney Plus, and suddenly the box office was drying up. I think there was also more significant pushback on what a lot of people felt was changing the core of the films. It really did feel like the era was over and done with, and this led into the troubled release of Snow White, which saw its two leads copying shit from opposite ends of the social media sphere, and ended with the crash and burn of the company's most enduring story. I guess there was now this idea in Disney's head that people didn't want these films anymore, but they were proven wrong in that assumption when Lilo and Stitch was released only months later and crossed $1 billion, becoming the biggest hit for Disney live-action remakes in over half a decade. Suddenly, plans for Tangled came roaring back to life with a realization. The nostalgia for Golden Age films wasn't all that strong, and they've exhausted their supply of Renaissance juggernauts. However, noughties nostalgia is largely untapped, and there's an audience there that's ravenous for it. In this day and age, not many films are crossing $1 billion at the box office anymore. The market is so different to what it was pre-COVID. However, Lilo and Stitch was able to draw that audience that grew up in the late 90s and 2000s, who have a lot of nostalgic love for the era. Plus, now those people might have children or younger siblings or whatever, which draws an even bigger crowd. Thus, Lilo and Stitch has proof that even films in the recent past are able to draw interest from the masses. So therefore, we're having the return of Tangled, which is aiming to bring in a similar type of audience. Whether it's going to succeed, it's too early to say, but I think there's strong evidence to suggest a lot of audience interest either way. Now, obviously, as with all Disney live-action remakes, there's been a lot of contentious debate as to whether this is a necessary film. Not that any film is really necessary, but you know what I mean. There are those that think that Disney needs to leave nostalgia in the past and that they're creatively bankrupt as a studio, and then there's those that think that remakes are a lot of fun and not everything has to be Oscar nominated. I tend to lean more towards that second view in this day and age. I think people judge these films with very harsh criteria, whilst at the same time pretending like the originals are completely perfect and don't have any issues at all. I prefer to simply wait and see whether I like the look of a trailer, and then judge the film based on what's in front of me. I'm not going to mindlessly hate, and neither am I going to shill for the billionaires either. For instance, I was super hyped for Lilo and Stitch going in, and indeed I actually thought that there was a lot to like about the movie, and thus I did defend it in my review. So many people got caught up in the hate wave and were completely unfair about a lot of aspects of the movie. That being said though, I could also acknowledge that they made a number of story changes that were very obviously inferior to the original film, and to this day I'm baffled they did it. There was also the likes of Pinocchio a couple of years ago. I was more than willing to give it a chance when it came out, and then it turned out to be among the worst Disney live-action films ever created, with pretty much zero redeeming qualities and inferior in every single way to the original. That being said, I don't want to get too bogged down in all of this. The reality is that until the end of time, there will be those that hate the idea of these films and those that don't. And ultimately, Disney is not going to listen to any of them. They're going to listen to box office and streaming numbers to figure out what the future holds. For now, Tangled is back on the menu, and we have our first casting news for both Rapunzel and Flynn Rider. We'll start off with Rapunzel, who's being played by Tegan Croft, who's an Australian actress, and for that fact alone, I already approve. I mean, what else is there to say? She has blonde hair and kind of looks like the animated character, but I haven't actually seen her in anything before. I took a look at her filmography and whatnot, and yeah, nothing I've seen, and a lot of her roles don't even have a wiki page, so I don't think they were hugely high profile. It seems her biggest role to date has been in the Teen Titans adaptation for DC titled Titans. I don't know whether it was any good, as I've never watched it, although it seems it had a mixed reception overall. I'm also not sure whether she can sing very well, but honestly, I hope so, because one, it would be very stupid to cast a relative unknown in such a high-profile role if she can't do one of the key elements of a musical film well, and then two, I See the Light is probably my favourite Disney love song ever, and if it gets bungled, nothing, and I mean nothing, will redeem the film for me. It'll be over forever. For now, I'm going to be optimistic about her casting. This then leads into somebody who's been getting far more attention and excitement online, and that is the casting for Flynn Rider. He will be played by Milo Manheim, who seems like he's hugely popular with the younger crowd as he is the star of the Zombies franchise. Yeah, I actually think this is rather clever, as he does seem to come with a built-in audience that might translate into this type of film very well. He also looks similar enough to Flynn Rider that it works. So yeah, some more good casting here in that regard at least. Once again, I don't know if he's a good singer, but looking at his filmography, the zombie films are musicals, and just last year he starred in Little Shop of Horrors, horrors, and was also featured in Jesus Christ Superstar, both on stage, so I think it's pretty clear he has the singing chops required. I really like they didn't go for massive mega names for the roles, as honestly, I think in those instances, it can come across sometimes as the actor/actress playing the character, as opposed to the character just feeling real within the film, you know? So already, I think we're off to a good start in terms of the overall quality of the film. The casting is really solid, which is all we know at this stage, but it's always good to start off on the right foot. However, that's not the only casting news that matters either. There are three major important characters in the story. We have Rapunzel and Flynn, aka Eugene, but then there's also Mother Gothel. Now, as of writing this, I should say there's no real definitive proof that somebody has been chosen, so these names might not appear at all, and it could be somebody else, although that being said, I do think they'd want a relatively major name for the role just to balance things out a bit more. Initially, there was chatter last year about Scarlett Johansson being eyed for the role, and she can sing, I'm pretty sure, and I think with the right styling could look the part, but at the same time, I think this would end up being a case of, like I said before, an actor playing the role rather than truly being the character. I don't know, maybe I'm being unfair with this, but I just don't see it. I much prefer the latest rumors, which is that Kathryn Hahn's been linked to the part. I have seen her in a fair bit of stuff, most recently Knives Out, Glass Onion, and I thought she was great, and I think she'll get that narcissistic portrayal down perfectly. I also think she has the right look for the character, although in the end, you can do anything with styling these days, can't you? As for the rest of the cast, it's very much early days as of right now, and honestly, I don't think it really matters all that much considering how the original plays out. The narrative is at its core a love story between the two leads, and a tale of breaking free of the woman who abducted her and used her for her own selfish ends. Yes, other characters do appear, but they're largely just bit parts who don't have that much dialogue or impact. I think outside the big three, the characters who have the most important dialogue are those twin brothers who Flynn portrays right at the start of the story, and even they are significantly less important overall than the big three, and thus could be played by anybody. Maybe they find actual twin brothers, maybe they just cast one guy and have him double dip across the roles and stitch together the scenes with digital effects. Who knows? Now that we've talked about the casting, we may as well dip into other areas of the film in this early stage of the game. In terms of the director, we have Michael Gracie, who seems to have a fair bit of experience with musical film, so that's very good. He directed The Greatest Showman, which I think was fairly well received, and most recently he directed Better Man, which whilst being a bit of a box office bomb, was also well received by those who did see it. Thus, I think he set up well to make a good musical film, and I'm not worried in that regard. As for the writer, I haven't seen most of her work, although the film she wrote and directed last year apparently was not that well received. On top of that, I think Thor Love and Thunder kind of sucked, and she co-wrote that, so I'm not hugely enthused. She's written other stuff that was apparently good, but I don't know. I'm just not that excited as of right now. I'm just worried she might serve up something truly shit, and that would be really depressing, although at the same time, I will admit that maybe I'm being a bit too harsh. I suppose for now it's just a case of wait and see what happens, and whether she's up to the task. Hell, for all we know, this won't even be the final creative team, as so much can change in Hollywood on a dime. Now I think I want to talk about the actual story itself, and what I think it should look like. I think it's clear that Disney has over the years had a couple of different strategies when it comes to these films. It's not a one-size-fits-all type of comparison. Sometimes you'll have a movie that completely reinvents the original film and makes you look at things in a new way, such as the Maleficent franchise. For a long time, Maleficent was just the evil witch that cursed Aurora to become Sleeping Beauty. Back in the older films, there was a lot more black and white style stories and not really much depth to the hero or the villain. Thus, a completely new course was charted, and sometimes it worked really well, and then sometimes it didn't. Other films will go for a very uniform approach to things, mostly recreating the original, but then adding things to make it seem a bit more fleshed out and to explain certain characters or make the world come to life. Then there are those that sit somewhere in between, and it can go either way as to whether it's good or not. For Tangled, I kind of want something that both visually and narratively resembles the original. I know that it's often considered the boring type of idea, but the reality is that this one's one of my favorites, and nothing pisses me off more than when it's decided an old classic can be improved by overhauling everything about the story. Instead, I think the better idea would be to try to fill the gaps and flesh out the characters a bit more whilst keeping the heart and the content of the original narrative. Maybe add a little bit more on how the guards were never able to find Rapunzel, despite her not being taken very far and her tower not being all that hard to find. Maybe add a bit more on how insidious Mother Gothel is, and lean even harder on the narcissistic mother vibe she gives off. I just hope they don't try to alter the story to give her a sympathetic quality or anything like that. This is not the time to try and give a villain more complexity or make them more morally grey. Some characters are supposed to be an open and shut case of being a total piece of shit, and it enhances their role in the story. By not having this be the case though, it would damage not just her character, but Rapunzel's as well, so I hope they resist that temptation. This then leads me to the visual side of things. Like I said, I kind of want them to lean very hard on the animated film vibes, similar costumes, similar sets, etc. But what about the animal companions, who are a tried and tested Disney classic? Over the years, Disney's experimented with various different vibes in this regard, ranging from hyper-realistic to more cartoonish in nature. I think for this film, they'll need a bit of both. For Pascal the Chameleon, I think they really need to lean on the more cartoonish side of things and make him as cutesy as possible. The reality is that I do not think a hyper-realistic chameleon is going to work. It's not that chameleons are ugly or not cute in their own way, it's just it wouldn't feel the same, and you know it. Thus, they got to take a page from Snow White's book and make him more cartoonish in nature to get across that cutesy storybook animal vibe. As for Maximus the horse though, I'm not sure the cartoonish vibe's the way to go. What would a horse in that style even look like, you know? I think the world is so accustomed to horses in films looking fully like a horse that it would feel alien. I kind of think a CGI enhanced horse would be the way to go here, but of course, that's just my view on things. I could be completely wrong, and they could go full cartoon, and it could look great. I just can't visualize it. Then we came to the music. Simply put, they cannot cut a single song from this film, otherwise it is all over for me. When Will My Life Begin? Mother Knows Best. I've Got a Dream. I See the Light. They're all definitive bangers. Generational songs. When Will My Life Begin is a wonderful look into Rapunzel's life and her overall personality. Mother Knows Best, a top tier villain song and probably one of the best of the modern era. I've Got a Dream is such a fun, upbeat comedy, whilst I See the Light is my favourite Disney love song ever written. So they have to keep all of these. It's not negotiable. However, that doesn't mean they can't add some more songs too. That's the beauty of this. You can fill the gaps. Maybe an opening song that can have a reprise at the end. The kingdom all singing about how happy they are to have a princess when she's born, and then at the end singing the song when she returns to her family at long last. I also think that Flynn needs a solo song at some point, maybe when he's in prison awaiting his execution or something along those lines. It needs to be a song that comes after he has a shift in character, because otherwise I feel like it would have less heart to it, you know? He's a completely different person after that. I'm actually rather shocked at how excited I am about this movie. We've only had a bit of vague casting news and suddenly I'm all aboard the hype train and ready to see how it goes. Maybe I'm setting myself up for massive disappointment, but that's the risk you gotta take sometimes, right? So with all that being said, these have just been my opinions and I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the video today? Did you like the casting choices that have been made? What about the other things we discussed? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment and subscribe and let me know.